Hello everyone, how you doing? Thanks as always for popping by. I'm going to keep my voice low yet again, but Father's still staying and he's having a good kip. He's in his 80s, so he needs his kips. Not as much as I do, but I keep different hours. So I've been catching up on some vids and I've just been watching Mark, Witness No More, and his last video, which is the Hull Purge and how we can help. And I was a bit disturbed by how the circuit overseer for Hull, I believe he's called Mr. Rose and pals, I hope you hear this, or at least watch Mark's videos, because I'm quite disturbed. I'm finding more and more that the lower down in the organisation, the corporation, the religion, whatever you want to call it, you are, the more you have to bear and the braver you have to be. And I don't think that's right, because the leaders, the higher you are, then the more servile you should be, the more protective you should be, and the braver you should be, because you'll be more godly, perhaps, more in the truth, to use some phrases. And it seems to be the opposite. So let's take for an example Herr Loesch, the one of the governing body members. He refused to appear in court. He was ordered to appear in court and he refused. Now that doesn't seem right, because as the leader you should take every opportunity to bear such a public witness, plus be prepared to go to court if things go to jail if things go wrong, because that is what you ask others and that is what happens. And as we all know, the last Australian Royal Commission, none of the governing body members would agree to talk. They left it to the lower downs, left them carrying the can. And okay, yeah, Jeffrey Jackson did, but that was only because he was in Australia and that legally he had no choice but to comply. So what about when you're lower down? Well, we know history. You were prepared to, you had to be prepared to go to prison. You had to be prepared to go to a Nazi death camp. You, in Malawi, you had to be, as a woman, had to be raped and murdered. So much. And in Russia now, the rank and file, the average JW will have to be prepared to go to prison. And we have this alarming story. Mark, as he says, Witness No More, he records everything. Very good, so everything can be seen. I would also say to Mark, can you on contemporary cameras and things, can you put up a date and time stamp? That might be an idea to keep that running in the corner as well, just to protect yourself, because we know that they will tell porcupines, to put it mildly. That's a lie for anyone who's not English. But there's this whole story of the circuit overseer. Mark turned up. He was peaceable. He came along to the gates of the Kingdom Hall when the circuit overseer was doing his rounds, Mr. Rose, and it seems that they backed up a van, wait for this, with Mr. Rose in the van, so that he would, and then he could sneak out a few feet and not have to deal with Mark. That is so cowardly. That is so cowardly. Like, Watchtower expect children to go to school and be bullied and beaten up for their faith. They expect children to do that. Yet a circuit overseer will not proudly walk past Mark with his head held high. And if it's the truth, we all know, when something's true, we will hold our heads high and we will speak out. And if I backcomb my hair, I stand about 5 foot and on my tippy toes. And let me tell you, if I know something's true, I will stand up. And indeed I have. And I don't know about you, I know years ago when I was young, I was promised I would be beaten up for following certain Watchtower rulings. And I followed them. Of course I did. Of course I did. And we're talking a big grown-up chap cannot walk past Mark with his head high. Shouldn't he be leading an example? Shouldn't he lead an example to the rest of his flock that he's supposed to have love and care for? And thinking about how further down in the Watchtower hierarchy, from the governing body all the way down, of course we know that under every man you have all the women, and they're supposed to be story after story after book after court case of the women who are supposed to endure being beaten up for the sake of the truth, to keep their families together. If they're being beaten up, it was their fault for not being subservient enough. How many times have they had to do that? They've had to endure that, terrible beatings, and some of them have been murdered. To many, many cases of that. You just search in on YouTube all the documentaries about them all that have been murdered. And below women, you have children. So children, as I said, are supposed to endure being beaten up at school. But also, historically, for decades and decades, they have been assaulted, sexually assaulted, raped by other Jehovah's Witnesses. And if we take the Australian Royal Commission numbers of the 1,006 Australian child sexual abusers, 58% of those actually confessed to the elders that they were guilty, yet none of them was handed in. Yet what were those children supposed to do for Jehovah's name? So that they didn't sully Jehovah's name, they and their families were coerced into just carrying on, which meant that the children did not get mental health treatment, emotional treatment, psychological treatment and physical treatment for what was damned horrendous things that can damage them and have damaged some of them for the rest of their lives, and that they fight against all the time. And let's not forget the numbers that will have died because of that. So little children were supposed to go home, even to their own homes, or their own family was raping them. Supposed to go home to that so as not to bring reproach upon Jehovah's name. A little child is supposed to endure being beaten to the point where their lives are in danger, being buggered, being raped, being vilely assaulted, so as not to bring reproach upon Jehovah's name. Mr. Rose, Hull Circuit Overseer, will not walk past one gentleman with his head high. He will not do that. Well, you look at the little children. You look at the little children and you learn. You learn, Mr. Rose, from those children. Because if you continue acting like this, you're not worthy of being their shepherd. And what happens when you disfellowship during this purge, as you disfellowship their parents? As we know, the children get shunned too. They get shunned from their relatives, from their Kingdom Hall friends, everyone. And they've not been allowed to build up other networks of people at school or out of school clubs and things. And let me ask you, Hull and all the other places where you're purging, do you consider for a second how many people are going to commit suicide because of these purges? Do you care? You can't do, because you wouldn't act like this. It is not love. And yes, Mark speaks kindly and lovingly to you. But I sometimes I feel so repulsed and revolted that you care so little about life, about these precious lives that entrusted themselves to you, and the children that have had no choice, and they are entrusted under your care. You're going to disfellowship their families, cut them off from families, and you have all of you higher up, well, Some elders have said they've acted responsibly, okay. But we're talking really high up. They have sent children back. They have sent children back to hell. To life-damaging hell. To keep Jehovah's name clean. Well, if it's that important, Mr. Rose, you can walk past Mark. Because let me tell you, if I disagreed with Mark, if I totally disagreed with him, there is nothing